While exploring the residential ruins of Boston just west of the castle, you find an unmarked location called the Hawthorne Estate. This is the hideout where Bobby No-Nose flees to at the end of the quest The Big Dig. You are sent here to eliminate her on the request of John Hancock. Inside the room, you find a holotape on the counter called the Ladies' Auxiliary Tape number 5.
Okay, hun. Just say it right into the little box here. This is a recording of the Ladies' Watch Auxiliary, of Boston. Say your name, precious. Jenny. Oh, right. This is Jenny speaking. Okay, sweetheart. And what are we doing tonight? Spying on Uncle Jake. No, honey, the other thing. Oh, right. We're catching bad guys. Aunt Becca, is Uncle Jake a bad guy? Only when he's had too much juice, princess. Now grab your coat. We're heading out.
Yeah, it doesn't really make much sense, but it's not the only one. Back outside, near the Raider blockade, you find a crumbling building with half of the wall and ceiling missing. You can only access it if you have a jetpack. Inside the small room, we find the Ladies' Auxiliary Tape number 10.
There it goes. This is surveillance tape number 10, Ladies' Watch Auxiliary of Boston. Becca Lankowski speaking.
Say, what are we the auxiliary of, anyway?
What do you mean, what auxiliary?
You know, Robbie's in the Veterans League. I'm in the auxiliary. We do bake sales and stuff, but we're the auxiliary of the Vets League.
So what?
I don't know. I just figured you had to be the auxiliary of something is all.
Drop it, Sue. Surveillance begins at, for Christ's sakes, 7:04 in the evening. Dorchester, currently in my front room, but we'll take a walk later. We've had a couple robberies lately, and I hear old McElroy is sneaking down to the Packy after Kitty falls asleep. We'll have an eye out for that. Sue, where'd you go? You getting the whistles and pepper spray?
Oh, yeah, see? It's here. Usually functioning in a subsidiary capacity of a larger organization. So, subsidiary means what, exactly? Anyway, I'm pretty sure it means you can't just be an auxiliary of nothing.
I swear to God. Sue, go grab the whistles and my flashlight so we can get going.
This is just as confusing as the previous holotape. Well, there is a third and final Ladies' Auxiliary holotape. To find this, you need to go to Pickman's Gallery. West of Pickman's Gallery, climb the nearby fire escape to the roof. You'll find a series of walkways made from plywood and 2x4s that ends at a white rooftop door. Inside, we find a small room, and next to the TV is the Ladies' Auxiliary holotape number 8.
Recording surveillance tape number 8, Ladies' Watch Auxiliary of Boston. This is Becca Lankowski. We're doing a watch in the North End tonight at my mother-in-law's place. Let's see, lately they've, Gemma, what was in the news here last week?
Noella's made a cheesecake as big as a table.
No, not that. I mean, didn't somebody get mugged or something up the way?
Oh, yeah, right. Ernest did just get a whole lot of new mugs up at the corner store. Nice. Made in Tennessee, I think.
For Christ's sake, Gemma! What about those kids they caught drinking in the Revere house? Anything like that?
Oh, Rebecca, that's very rebellious of you. Drinking in Paul Revere's house. I'll get my coat and a bottle of Irish.
Oh, brother, wait up, Gemma.
Keeping true to form, this final holotape is just as perplexing as the other two. And that's it. There are no more auxiliary holotapes. There are no terminals that talk about the Ladies' Auxiliary. That's all the information that we have. What on earth is this all about? Well, everything I'm about to say is pure speculation, but this is what I've pieced together from the clues that have been left in the holotapes. First, let's go back to the Hawthorne estate where we find the first tape. I do not think it is coincidental that we find two of the holotapes so close together. This leads me to believe that Rebecca Linkowski is either a friend or relative of the Hawthorns, the people who lived in the Hawthorne estate. So who lived in this estate? Well, if you go to Diamond City, we find a man who is an explorer named Hawthorne.
You first. What's your name?
Hawthorne, and you are definitely from out of town. I know every settlement from both sides of the Charles River, and I've never seen you. Anyway, I'm just kicking back and sharing stories while I'm between things. I've been all over, seen vaults, pre-war ruins, and plenty of monsters.
He lives in Diamond City with his grandmother, Eustace. We learn from Eustace that Hawthorne's father was a man named Julian Hawthorne, but we really don't know what his fate was.
My grandson calls himself Hawthorne, but it's really his last name. I'm Eustace Hawthorne, and his father was Julian Hawthorne. Hawthorne's mother was the adventurous type, too. She gave him such a lovely first name. It's a shame he doesn't go by it.
Apparently Hawthorne is an explorer similar to the sole survivor. He manages to find his way all over the Commonwealth. If you go to Abernathy Farm, you find that Lucy Abernathy talks about her secret crush on Hawthorne. The problem is that none of these Hawthornes live in Hawthorne Estate. They live in Diamond City, but they do live in the upper stands, which means that they come from wealth. They come from pedigree, kind of like the people who need pedigree to live at a place called Hawthorne Estate. Estates are either one of two things. They're beautiful, sprawling estates, or they're trailer parks. This one is clearly the former. My bet is that Hawthorne is descended from a long line of Hawthornes that lived here in Boston, stretching all the way back to the War of 2077 and probably long before. The only hiccup in this theory is that if you go to Sanctuary, one of the mailboxes on one of your neighbor's homes says Hawthorne. So in addition to whomever was living at Hawthorne Estate in downtown Boston, apparently you, the sole survivor, had neighbors called the Hawthornes as well. But this terminal doesn't say anything about being related to the Hawthornes of downtown Boston or having ever been to downtown Boston. Maybe the Hawthornes that were your neighbors were cousins of the Hawthornes that lived downtown. We don't really know for sure. But what I want to establish with this, if my theory is correct, is that the Hawthornes were a fairly affluent family living in an estate close to downtown Boston before the bombs dropped. This would explain why 200 years later, descendants of the Hawthorne family are well-to-do enough to live in the upper stands in Diamond City. So next, what is the Ladies' Auxiliary? Well, we know from the lore of the game and various other terminals we find in the game that just before the bombs dropped in 2077, there was a lot of civil unrest. There were riots, there were protests, there were demonstrations. Due to the energy shortage, fossil fuels had more or less run out. Vehicles ran on batteries and nuclear power. It was so bad that the US military had to declare martial law the year before the bombs dropped. Rebecca, in her holotape, is clearly trying to set up some sort of vigilante crime-spotting group. She goes out late at night with her friends, she spies on potential criminals, and she tries to right wrongs. We can glean this much from holotape number 10. Rebecca is talking about local robberies. They're talking about bringing whistles and pepper spray with them. But I don't think that it's post-war, because the kinds of crimes they're talking about seem fairly modest. In holotape number 8, which is all the way over by the Pickman Gallery, Rebecca is talking with Gemma, who is an elderly lady, and apparently her mother-in-law. She's even trying to rope her mother-in-law into this Ladies' Auxiliary League that she's put together. But Gemma appears to be a little senile. She's not quite connecting the dots, not quite understanding what Rebecca is talking about. And the local crimes that Rebecca is talking about is maybe somebody got mugged, and she talks about kids that were caught drinking in the Paul Revere house. At the end of the holotape, her mother-in-law Gemma says, "Oh, I'd love to go drinking at the Paul Revere house. Let's go get a bottle of Irish." And apparently Rebecca follows her out. So I believe that these events clearly happened before the war. It's safe enough to go outside, and families are still living in these scattered houses in and around downtown Boston. We also learn from holotape number 8 that Rebecca is married. She's at her mother-in-law's place. So we see the portrait of a married woman connected to the Hawthorne family, using her nights to organize the ladies in her life into a crime-stopping group. Now that we have all of the moving pieces of this narrative organized, let's try to iron this out into a cohesive story. Before the war, there lived a woman named Rebecca Linkowski. She lived in a house next to the Hawthorne estate. We know this because in holotape number 10, she says that she's recording from her bedroom. We must assume that the tape hasn't been moved over the previous 200 years. She has established a ladies' auxiliary. Auxiliary of what? We don't know. She didn't think that far ahead, but it's a ladies' auxiliary that goes out at night to spot crime and potentially stop evildoers. But it can't be too bad because she's willing to take her family with her. We learned from holotape number 5 that she's willing to take her niece. Because we find the tape in the Hawthorne estate, we can assume that Rebecca Linkowski married a man named Jake Hawthorne, because her niece Jenny refers to him as Uncle Jake, and Rebecca seems to know Jake well enough to understand that sometimes he drinks a bit of the juice. She'll take her niece out at night with pepper spray, whistles, and flashlights to spot evildoers. Sometimes she takes her friends, like her friend Sue, whom we learn about in the 10th holotape, and sometimes she even tries to get her senile elderly relatives to come with her, as we learn in the 8th holotape. This all ends when the bombs drop, and her descendants become the affluent Hawthorne family that lives in the upper stands of Diamond City, if we can assume that her husband Jake is part of the Hawthorne family. So, a lot of speculation going on here, I will freely admit that, but Bethesda has given us so very little to work with that I tried to piece together this little side story as best as I could. What did you think of these holotapes? Were you confused by them? Did you think they were unnecessary? I, for one, liked them. I thought they gave us a little bit of a snapshot into the innocent world that was destroyed when the bombs dropped, at least the innocent mindset of many of the normal citizens of Boston who lived there in 2077. If we were to explore the ruined residences in a real post-apocalyptic world, we would find a lot of stuff like this. Private VHS tapes, private CDs, private DVDs, all with a bunch of private recordings that wouldn't make any sense to us because we're not part of those families, but made sense to the people who were recording them. So this just makes the world feel a little bit more believable to me. So how did I piece things together, ladies and gentlemen? Did I miss anything? Can you think of a better connection between the Hawthorne estate and the Hawthorne family that lived in Sanctuary? If Jake was really part of the Hawthorne family, why would his mother be living in a rooftop apartment on the opposite side of town? Why wouldn't she be living in the estate with them? Was it Rebecca's descendants that became the Hawthornes we know in Diamond City? Or perhaps it was young Jenny's descendants that became the Hawthorne family? Let me know what you think, ladies and gentlemen, in the comments below. I read all of your comments and I use them for inspiration for my future videos. I produce a new video each and every day of the week, so please subscribe to see what I come up with tomorrow. And if you like what I do and you want to support me in a more personal way, consider becoming one of my patrons on Patreon. Patreon subscribers gain access to my private Discord server as well as a bunch of other cool Oxhorn perks. But more than anything, ladies and gentlemen, I'm just so very glad that you're here with me today watching this video. Thank you so much from the bottom of my heart, and I'll see you tomorrow morning bright and early with a brand new video.